Good evening, everybody. My name is Jake Newsom, and I'm part of the campus outreach team at the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum, and so we welcome you all here tonight on behalf of the museum. This evening, we have a chance to hear from two people for whom this was not just history. This is not just something that happened in textbooks, but this is something that is from their own personal memory. So again, we're not here tonight to compare or equate the experiences of these two remarkable individuals. We're not here to gloss over the unique natures of their personal experience. We're here tonight to hear from two women with powerful stories about the dangers of racism and anti-Semitism. They're here to share how these larger historical forces that the scholars talked about today affected real people in their everyday lives. But first we have Mrs. Riva Hirsch, whose story began in what is today Ukraine. She survived the Holocaust, and life eventually brought her here to Birmingham, Alabama. So we're definitely glad to have you here tonight, Riva. And second, joining us is Miss Josephine Bowling McCall. She was born about 100 miles south of here in Lowndes County, Alabama, and her family was the victim of murderous racism during the era of Jim Crow. So thank you for being here with us tonight to share your story, Jo. All right, so the first question is for Riva. So Riva, can you tell us a little bit about your childhood and your family?
Yes, I can tell you one thing, that I had a beautiful family, and I had a beautiful childhood, and I had everything. We weren't rich, but I had everything that I needed until the murderer came.
So can you tell us about when and where you were born?
I was born in a place, it's called Novi Selac, which is, that time when I was born, it was Russia, and then it turned on to Romania, and now became Ukraine.
How many siblings did you have?
I had two siblings, one brother older than me, and one brother younger than me. We were three children.
Can you tell us about your parents, your mom and your dad?
We all had survived. They lived for a little bit. They survived the misery, but then they passed on with sicknesses.
Okay. So before the war started, in your town where you grew up, did Jews and non-Jews live side by side?
Side by side. In fact, my dad was a foyer. We had a little manufacturer in back of our home, and we had a lot of non-Jewish people working for us, and they were part of our family. There was no discrimination. We loved them.
Okay, thank you. All right, so Jo, likewise, could you tell us a little bit about your childhood and your family?
I was born in Lowndes County, Alabama. You mentioned it's about 100 miles from here. And one of the most important things you need to know about Lowndes County is that it was known as Bloody Lowndes. And it had that name because whites killed whites with no repercussions, and of course, whites killed blacks. Also, when the march came through and we had the people who came to help Martin Luther King, Viola Loizo was killed in Lowndes County, and also the minister, Jonathan Daniel, who came from Boston, was killed in Lowndes County. So that gives you a little bit of a setting about Lowndes County. Also, W.E.B. Du Bois had come to Lowndes County and reported to the government that it was still honeycombed in slavery, and this was in 1947. In fact, peonage was on the Constitution books in Alabama, and that was if a person owed a plantation owner, you could not move off that property. So nobody wanted to live on certain properties because there was a man named Bob Dixon who would actually kill you if you attempted to move off his property.
How many siblings did you have?
I had 5 brothers and 1 sister, and my sister's here in the red coat tonight. I was 5 when my father was killed, and my oldest brother was 15. My father was very, very hardworking. He never used the pronoun I. He always referred to himself as me, and he never learned to read or write. He started out with the mule and wagon, and then after that, he purchased a T-model car, which he converted to a truck. And he was hauling kindling from Lowndes County to Montgomery. And everybody needed kindling because there were no electric stoves or gas stoves at that time. So that was a very, very good market for him. So he actually went from the car that he converted into a truck and owned 3 tractor trailer trucks. And also he was very helpful with other residents in Lowndes County. As he moved up the ladder, he ensured that other people were not dependent solely on cotton for their living.
Great, thank you. All right, now we're going to come back to Reva. So Reva, you were 7 years old when World War II reached your town. So could you tell us a little bit about that, when war came to your town?
I was 7 years old when the war broke out in my town. I didn't know about the war anything until the second time around that somebody came to tell my parents that something bad is going on in our area. But then they did not have a choice, my parents, to come into the room that we children were playing to let us know that something bad is going on in the area and that we're gonna have to leave the house. But we cannot take anything. Like I said, we weren't rich, but we had a ball, we had a bicycle, I had a dog. My mom said, nothing of that you'll be able to take. The only thing you'll be able to take is what me and Grandma and make you to take, which they made us little packages.
Who came and warned you about the war?
The first time came a gentleman that worked for my father. The second time came another gentleman also that worked, but I did find out his name. His name was Joshua. And that was the second time when my father opened the door. He could have seen the bombs already flying. He could have heard the alarms going on. He could have smelled the human flesh. Then it was time to tell us that we had to leave.
And so you said you were able to grab a couple of possessions?
Not me, but my mother, and that time my grandmother lived with us, my mother's mother, and they made us some packages, and we took the packages, and we left, opened the door, and we Jewish people have a mezuzah on the door, and my grandmother said, kiss the mezuzah because I don't think we're ever gonna come back again, and we didn't.
And where did you go?
We went into the forest, we went into fields, until we walked miles, which I cannot tell. In Europe there is no miles, there is kilometers. And it started to get bad, it started to get dark and nasty. So my mother turned around and said to my dad, Joe, maybe we turn around. The same gentleman, Joshua, he had a mare. Maybe he can put us up for the night because we don't know where we're going with the children. So we turned around from the forest, walked into a little bridge. We came to his house. We know he is there because we did see a little light. My dad knocked on the door. This time my dad knocked on his door. He did not open the door. So my mother, she still had her jewelry on her. Her diamond. She ripped everything off and she knocked on the door. And she told him, Joshua, please, it's me, Vega. I need to talk to you. His heart must break. And he opened the door. And before she gave him the things, she said to him, I want you to take me into your mill, to put me out with the children. We don't know where we're gonna end up. He did not say anything, but he shook his head. And we did follow them. He did agree. We did went into his mill. And he put us out.
Thank you, Reva. It must have been a lot for a child of your age to go through.
I did.
So, Joe, you were also a child. You were 5 years old in December of 1947 when you and your family learned one day that your father had been killed. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, my father had air horns on his tractor trailer. And whenever he passed by the store, he would always alert us by blowing the air horns to let us know he was passing. We were expecting him to stop at the store, but when he came along, he didn't stop. He blew the air horn, so we knew he was going to keep going. However, what we didn't know was that someone was following him. And at that time, it was customary if a person pulled the lights on, the headlights on the car behind you 3 times, that meant for you to stop. So a car was following him, pulled the lights on 3 times, and my father pulled into the fork which led to our house, which was about 100 yards from our store. At this time, my father was employing people to work at the store, and about 35 or 40 people worked on the farm. So he had riders with him who helped him load and unload the truck. We heard the shots. My 2 brothers and sister were with us at the store with my mom, and we heard the shots and we thought someone was probably killing some cows. But by that time, one of the persons who was riding with my dad ran up to the store and said, Canelmo has been killed. And so my mom said, get the gun. And he said, oh, there's no need, he's already dead. So she got the gun anyway, and we went down, which is like less than 100 yards, as I mentioned, to the site where my father was killed. I did get to see him lying in the ditch with his eyes open, and he was deceased. The police had come by, the sheriff back then, had come by earlier that day looking for my father, and my brother told him he was not there. And after that, 2 men in a car had come by looking for my father. So it was actually the 2 men in the car who had come by looking for my father that was following him. And my brother, who was outside handling the service station, we had gas tanks, actually saw the car and also saw the murder.
So Reva, let's pick up where we left off. Joshua eventually came and told your family that y'all could not hide in the mill any longer because the SS were coming, right?
Yes. He came back running after maybe, like I said, I cannot tell time or date. He came running, I should say maybe a couple of minutes later, and said that we have to stand up and leave the mill because he found out that the SS are around his mill with the horses, with the motorcycles, with the German shepherds. If they come in and they find that he put us out there, they would kill him, they would kill his family, and they would kill us, which is the truth.
And so what happened after you and your family were...
After we stood up again, what happened? We had to go back to the forest, go back to the fields. Meantime, the packages that we had were gone. Everything was starting to get filthy, excuse me, full of lice. We got sick. We had to go into the fields to look for something to grab and back to the forest. And while we were walking to the forest, my other set of grandparents, my father's parents, they lived in a place, it's called Hotin, which is pretty far. Let's say like from here to Atlanta, maybe farther. My father said maybe, by chance, the Germans never arrived there. Maybe we could make it to them. We never made it to them. My fellows, students, and guests, they surrounded us. They started ripping us apart. They separated us. They threw us to another section. My brothers to another section. My mother, while we were holding down to her skirt, she didn't let us go. She didn't let us leave her. They turned her on and they beat her up with the baguettes. It's the truth. I can say one thing to you all, my fellow students and friends. A lot of denial going on. It's not a denial. You have to make sure there is no more things like that should happen. It is the truth.
And so, as you were captured, you and your family were captured, and that's when you and your family were forced to wear the yellow star.
They took us apart, they put us on the yellow star, and they told us always that they're going to take us to a better place. Always said, you're going to take us to a better place. We had to stay by the wall. In front of you, they were staying with the big baguettes. Meantime, you could have seen in front of you dead bodies, children, babies, smaller than me, than 7 years old. My feet had stepped while I was marching, and children, and grown-ups, and babies. So we marched, they gave us the yellow star. Meantime, they said that the train will come. It was not a regular train. It was a cattle train. They must have collected people from other places. And while the train came into the station, me, as a 7-year-old, could have seen that they opened the metal doors and shoveling out dead to life bodies from the train.
So, as you were forced to wear the yellow star in this town, as you were forced to, on the transport trains going through, I'm guessing going through towns, did you notice any of the townspeople noticing what was on the trains?
Let me tell you, I have a lot of answers for that. I was a little girl. I was fearing for my life. Who had in mind to look, to know what hands they're taking me? I didn't know every quarter of a minute that I will be surviving. But one thing I could tell you all, that I did see, after they threw me into the train, piles and piles and piles of dead bodies that they came from other places. That I saw, but not towns.
Okay, thank you, Reva.
I'm sorry.
So, Joe, I also would like to talk about the community reaction to your father's lynching. And we'll talk in a moment about how you uncovered that it was indeed a lynching. But can you tell us about how the community reacted to your father's murder?
Most of the blacks were afraid to talk. They were interviewed by a newspaperman, and he mentioned that in the article that they were afraid to talk because they knew the same thing could happen to them. There was no mercy on anybody at that time, so you had better keep your mouth shut, stay inside, and not say anything.
And did your own family ever talk about what happened to your father?
They did, but not around me since I was so young. They shielded me from all of the bad things as I had witnessed him lying in the ditch, deceased. And of course that was very traumatic for me. They sent me to bed that night and everybody met at the store and they planned and talked about it. The sheriff came to interview my mom. My brother, who witnessed the murder, had scrawled the tag number of the white men who had come by the store in the dirt. And he tried to show the sheriff the tag number, but the sheriff wasn't interested. And it was simply because they already knew what was going to happen and it was already planned.
So Joe, you and your family moved to Montgomery a couple years after your father's murder. Could you tell us about that decision, your mother's decision to move to Montgomery?
My grandfather was a man who fought a lot, and he had no problem fighting. He fought as hard as he worked. He was a laborer. He raised cattle. He had lots of cattle, but he also drank alcohol. And so he, on weekends, when he went out to drink, he also fought. And 2 years after my father was deceased, some young white men, just above teenage level, but they were grown, came to our house and told my grandfather they wanted him to help them find some Brahma bulls. And my grandfather was always helpful. And when they carried him out in the woods, they told him, no, we brought you out here to whip you. So my grandfather beat both of them, put them on their horses, and gave the horse a hard smack. And they left trotting back off to their parents. When my uncle saw my grandfather, he knew something was wrong. And when he told him what had happened, my uncle said, Papa, I'm gonna get you out of here. They killed Buddy. That's what he called my father, Buddy. They killed Buddy and nothing was done about it. So I'm gonna get you out of here. So that evening, my mother had one truck left. She had sold off all the other trucks. We got on the back of the truck with whatever we could put on there, and we fled Lowndes County, and we moved to Montgomery, and that's where I grew up.
Thank you. So now, Reva, I've heard you say that by a miracle, a man who spoke German found you and rescued you. So could you tell us about that, please?
Yes, I can. That was really a miracle, but he also had a good heart, because a lot of them did not have a good heart, and he saved me. He was my guardian angel.
And so how did he rescue you? Where did he take you?
I was already in my camp. We never had like Buchenwald, the Warsaw Ghetto, or others, it's called the Lager, in the Ukraine. And I was laying more dead than alive, and one man came over, he put his hand on my mouth, and he said to me in German. Now, Jewish and German is a little bit similar. So I understood what he meant. I couldn't talk because I was very sick with malaria, typhoid, like I said, full of lice. But I shook my head, and he said, "You're gonna play dead." He put his hand on my mouth, and he took me on his shoulder, and he started running. That I'm still running. He put me under a carriage, that the carriage was far away, was built up hay, and he put me under, and I just had a little bit of an opening. And I want you to know that they did stop the carriage, and again a miracle happened. They didn't go under. And I was laying there until I came to a place which is called Tulchin. And it was a convent. It was at night. Me as a little Jewish girl, I never seen a nun. Some young lady came out, and he threw me into her arms, and she started running with me. And she spoke German, and she said, which I understood, she dragged me because I could not walk. And she said, "You're gonna have to be here. We're gonna come once in a while to bring you something to eat, because we cannot come every day. They're circling around. If they're gonna see us coming, they're gonna know that we're hiding here somebody. And I want you to know, I find out it was not just me. There were more children hidden there. They were great. And if they brought in the food, I was so sick that I couldn't take it. So when I looked around for it, it was gone. Maybe rats, maybe other animals, but it was gone. But like I said before, they were my guardian angels. I survived through them.
Thank you, Reva. So, Joe, when you were about 35 years old, you stumbled across some information that started you on a journey of research and exploration into your father's murder. Can you tell us about that moment?
Yes, I was at my mom's house and a lady came to visit her and she had a newspaper article very neatly folded and she showed it to us. That was a newspaper clipping that had appeared on the front page of the Montgomery Advertiser the Sunday after my father was murdered. That article was very thorough. It mentioned that he had been shot 6 times with a pistol and once in the back with a shotgun. It mentioned also that a white man had been arrested for his murder. And as you know, they were not arresting whites for killing blacks at that time. Also, it mentioned that another white man was seen at the scene and that the truck that my father had several children in it, which indicated that there were witnesses. I decided I would go to the Archives and History and get that article. So when I got the article, I decided I would do further research. So I did research for about 10 years, and once I started interviewing, and the people whom I interviewed also said, you know, your father, the only way he wouldn't help someone was that the person didn't ask. So I got all kinds of good information and everybody was just given all kinds of accolades. So then I discovered that many people knew that this was planned, and I decided it was time that my father got some recognition for what he had done. So in 2006, I started working on a marker. In 2007, he had been deceased 60 years, and my family and I erected a historic marker.
What information led you to the conclusion that this was in actuality a lynching?
Several things. There was an article in the Chicago Defender the same month in 1947, and it began by saying some jealous men enraged about the success of a black man were said to be the lynchers of Elmo Bowling. So the word lyncher, that was the first time that I had seen the word lynch mentioned in regards to my father's death. So then I started doing some research into what a lynching is, and I found that the definition of lynching has nothing to do with the noose around your neck. A lynching is determined by the number of people who commit the crime and that there's no due process. You've heard about Emmett Till in Mississippi, the one who got killed was thrown in the river. That was a lynching. All of the people that Ida Wells was seeking to vindicate through the President of the United States had been shot. So that was when I went to Tuskegee University to see whether my father's name had been mentioned in their records. Tuskegee kept a record of lynchings, and it was not there. At that time, the definition of lynching was 3 or more persons involved. And as time evolved and people were getting wiser, they started using 2 people to do the crime. And then when you think about it, I mentioned to you that my father was shot 6 times with a pistol and once in the back with a shotgun. That tells you what? More than one person was involved. So what I really discovered was that Lowndes County had planned my father's murder, and they also had planned to make sure that it did not look like a lynching.
Why do you think that it was important for them to make it not look like a lynching? Because as recent research has shown, lynching was pretty widespread throughout the South. So what was it about this case that they would want to hide the fact that it was a lynching?
At this time, a lot of legislation had been planned. They've been trying to get it through the U.S. Congress. The House of Representatives had passed a lynching law, but it never could get through the Senate. A law did not get through, it was mentioned in 2005 that the Senate never did pass a lynching law, but at this time, counties were being held responsible in writing if the sheriff or other people allowed someone to be taken from the jails. They were being held and fined. There was Association of Southern Women to prevent lynching. And in 1942, that group had come to Lowndes County because a man had been lynched, and it was reported that he had raped a businessman's wife. Well, this group, ASWPL, came to Lowndes County and proved that the businessman, and they called him out by name, owed the person $80 and didn't want to pay him. So the NAACP had started going to places where lynchings had occurred. So Lowndes County did not want the attention, and they certainly did not want the Association of Southern Women to prevent lynching to come back into town.
So it was to protect their own selves.
Right.
Thank you. So, Reva, the World War II ended in the spring of 1945. Can you tell us what the end of the war meant for you? How did you experience liberation?
It meant to be, first of all, I didn't know too much about the liberation. Like I said, I was too young, but it meant to be a lot for me because it was a group that were able to save the children and to make sure that they go to Palestine. That time was not Israel. So we were chosen to go with the family to Israel, like I said, to Palestine. Unfortunately, they had bombed our ships, Pan York and Pan Christian, and they almost drowned us. And they took us out and they put us in Cyprus. So I was again locked up in Cyprus in another war.
And did other members of your family survive as well?
They survived there too, but they were in different camps. It was the summer camp, the winter camp, but we didn't know from each other until 1948 when we came to Israel, to Palestine.
So it was 3 years before you were reunited with some of your family?
Yeah, my older brother and my younger brother, they were in two different camps. So
let's talk about your life a little bit after the war.
After the war, like I said, after Cyprus, I came to, that time, like I said, was still Palestine. The war was still going on with the Arabs and with the British. I was still in a camp which is called Mabara, but it was honey. It was my country. I know that I shouldn't be afraid anymore, even the war goes on. I'm in a safe place now. And I went to school to learn Hebrew. Now I want you to know, I never had an education. And I did learn on myself 7 languages to write and speak. I don't know, I never went to school. But I went in Israel to learn Hebrew. And I wanted to find out what happened to my young age. And I did meet, I went to work in a cafeteria. And I met my beautiful, handsome husband. He should rest in peace. I lost him yesterday, was his memorial, 4 years. And we got married in 1950. And I had beautiful children, 2 children. My daughter is here, Cheryl. I just happened to lose my son almost 9 years ago, and I have my daughter Felicia and my daughter-in-law. I have beautiful grandchildren, beautiful great-grandchildren, and that's what happened after the war.
Thank you. I mean, your story brought you all across the world, it seemed. When did you arrive here in Birmingham?
I did arrive to Birmingham, I think 28 years ago, to my children here. We came to, the first war we came in 1962. I came to this country to give my children the best education that he took away from us, from me and my husband. Because my husband was a survivor, and he lost his family in the gas chambers in Warsaw Ghetto. He survived, the only one. So we came to this country because we had a little family in Charleston, South Carolina, and they find out that he survived, the only one, and they brought us to the United States to give here my kids the best education, the best things in the world, because it is the best country in the world.
Thank you. In the years as you're moving along and you come to America, did you ever talk about what happened during the Holocaust?
I did start speaking. Me and my husband did not speak for a while until the kids were born. They were small. Between us, we knew from where we come in and what happened to us. But then one day we decided we need to speak up. And then we had Schindler's, the one that made Schindler's List, what's his name? Spielberg called, and he came to Birmingham, and he started talking to us, and he stopped making the tapes and all that. And then we really went out to speak all over that we need. It's very important to open the doors and the windows to let them know that a Holocaust did exist. Like I said before, it's still going on, and it's still a lot of denial going on.
Thank you, and thank you for going around and sharing your story.
Thank you.
Okay, and the next question is for Joe. We'll trade microphones again. So Joe, a similar question for you. After you researched your father's lynching and you came to these astonishing conclusions, what was the reaction of people as you started telling his story?
Most of them were simply shocked because no one in my high school knew anything about it, or college. And even now, there's some people who've known me all my life, and when I said, I wrote a book, I said, let me see. And they are surprised. It has been different for me. And after I wrote a book, then one of my daughter's friends says, well, when is the foundation coming? So then I started a foundation in the memory of my father. So we have a nonprofit foundation. And one of my friends now, a person came from Boston, I put it like that, picked up one of the brochures out of the interpretive center and went back to Boston and sent me a donation. And over the years, she continued to send me donations, and then I didn't hear anything. And Montgomery Advertiser did another great big story on us, and I sent that to Boston to my friend Victoria Rothbaum. And she said, if you ever come to Boston, I can get you an audience of about 1,000 people. And I said, well, I've written a book, can you help me with the book? And so she said yes, and she planned 2 book signings every day for a week. And I went to Boston, and one of those book signings was at the Northeastern University School of Law. I did a talk there. And they have a program called Civil Rights and Restorative Justice, and they look into cold cases like my dad's, and they were so amazed at the research I had done. So I got to speak to the class, and they made my book required reading. And then Victoria Rothbaum started volunteering with this attorney's class. She's a lawyer, and now she's chair of my board. So then we came through the South, well, through Alabama, doing conferences. And one of the conferences was at Tuskegee, then we did one in Birmingham. And that's how Tina met me, and that's how I got here tonight.
And we're so glad you are here tonight.
Thank you.
Okay, I have one last question. It's going to be for the both of you. So we have heard, your personal stories from these histories. They are very painful stories in a lot of ways. There are, glimpses of hope, glimpses of the goodness of people as well, sprinkled throughout. Many of us here tonight might be sitting here listening to these stories, thinking about the injustice that's in the world, the discrimination, and thinking, I'm just one person. I'm just an ordinary person. What can I do to make a difference? So if you could give them, the young people here, one piece of advice, one lesson to take home with them tonight, what would it be?
First of all, I want to say you have to go around speaking, to make sure to educate our youngsters, our students, because the future is in your hands. To make sure no more hatred, no more bloodshed. And the second, the third one, to make sure that the world to know, to never, ever let it happen again.
I feel the same way about making sure the messages continue. We have to acknowledge what has gone on before we can begin to reconcile and come together. One important thing that I did not mention earlier was that my father could not buy trucks with the money he had because he would have gotten put in jail because they would have thought this colored man has no business with this kind of money. So every time he got ready to buy a truck, there was a white man who would go with him, pretend that he was buying the truck, and then when it was time to pay, he would say, put the truck in this man's name. And that's how my father got his trucks. So the other big thing was the man whose property you couldn't move off. My father would not work on his property because of that, but he started hauling for him. And during this process, it worked out to be good for both of them because my father was not even supposed to have trucks on the highway. So then he was able to say that the trucks belonged to Bob Dixon. And before he was killed, Bob Dixon tried 5 times to get him to leave Lowndes County, but my father refused. He said, me just making a living for me family, me ain't running, and my father would not leave. So in one of my book discussions, my son stood up and said, Mom, knowing what you know now, how white people treated your family, he said, I've never seen you act like that. How did you accept being who you are? So the lesson that comes to me, and I was in this big crowd of people, had no idea he was going to ask that question. My mom always said, you do unto others as you would have them do unto you, and all of that. So that was the way we were raised. So with that in mind, I would say one thing that I would like for you to do is to continue the discussion. But Hebrews 13 chapter, first verse simply says, let brotherly love continue.
Well, thank you so much, Josephine and Reva. I want to thank you both again for being with us here tonight and sharing your story. I know I can speak on behalf of everyone that we're very honored to be here to help keep the memory alive. So if you'll join me in thanking Reva and Josephine. So now I think we would have some time to have questions from the audience, if that's okay with y'all. Yeah? Okay. So, first question. Oh, here.
I have a question for Ms. Josephine. How did your family operate when your father died?
We didn't.
Can you repeat the question?
Okay, so the question was for Josephine, how did her family continue to operate after her father was killed?
That is one of the purposes of lynching, is to terrorize. And when my father was killed, I had 2 uncles, and of course my brothers, the oldest was 15. But when the people who had been customers for my dad came and said, "Who's going to drive the trucks?" My uncle said, "Not me, that's how Buddy got killed." So terrorism is what they intend, and terrorism is what they got. We let the store sell out the goods that were already there, and my mom had help with selling the trucks, and we lost everything.
Yes. Pam?
Did you say, I don't think you said, but did you say that you found out who specifically had killed your father?
Yep, so the question was, did you find out specifically who killed your father?
The newspaper article had the name of the man in it. Remember, they were doing everything they could to keep people from coming in. So the newspaper article named one of the murderers, but at the same time, the newspaper article also said another white man was there. It did not name him. But one of the interviewees, and of course my family knew it, one of the interviewees told me what caused the problem. My father got some land, that's where he had the store and the farm and all of the trucks. And a white man's mother was living on that property, and she had to move. So even though my father moved her where she wanted to go, her son said, "I'm gonna get you, nigger." And he was the other killer.
Yes. Tina?
It's a question for me, but were you able to stay in touch with the people who rescued you?
So the question was, were you able to keep in touch with the people who rescued you?
No. I think they themselves probably got killed afterwards, or got passed away or something. No.
No. Yes. Hannah?
What did life become when they moved to Birmingham?
So what did life become like for you after you moved to Birmingham?
Wonderful. The people are great. I love Birmingham. It's very sweet. And I have my beautiful friends here, beautiful children. Everybody's my friend here. And I love it.
Another question? Yeah.
Rita, will you tell about the time that you confronted a Holocaust denier?
She wants to know, for you to tell about the time that you confronted a Holocaust denier.
There is a lot. There is a lot. I don't want to go into details right now, but a lot of denials going on. I want to tell you one little thing. I was one day in the radio with my husband, and everybody, some people was very excited and thanked us that we survived, that God was good to us. But one fella called in and he said, I don't believe that happened. I said to him, excuse me, you are a big and charlatan.
That was it, huh?
That was it.
Well, I guess I will follow up. So we know about Holocaust denial. Joe, have you ever had anyone who has challenged you about your conclusions that your father was lynched?
Not about the conclusions that he was lynched because of the research I did that proved, the definition of a lynching. But I have what I call a pop-up, which is the front cover of my book. And I had it out at Maxwell Air Force Base where I was selling my book. And I noticed that this white man walked up there and he stood there staring at it and reading it. And so I said, I would like to tell you about it. Why don't you just forget about this? You need to forget about this. I said, forget about this? And he was so angry, he turned red and walked out. So I think that's probably one of the worst things that I've encountered, that he just wanted me to forget about it.
I have something to add to this. I just want you all to know not to be afraid, to speak up. It's very important because right now, blood is shedding. You have to step up. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. Speak up. Make sure it's never gonna happen anymore. Hatred and bloodshedding. Thank you.
So we do have time for one more question. Over here.
For Reva, would you ever go back to what is now Ukraine?
So the question was, would you ever go back to Ukraine now?
No way, no. I want my children to go to see what had happened, but me, no. Because if I go there, they're bringing me now back in a casket. I don't want to go there. No.
Okay, so thank you all for coming tonight. I will just say, if you want to check out Josephine's book, it's called The Penalty of Success. My father was lynched in Lowndes County. Reva is a YouTube star. You can go find her story on YouTube if you search her name, Reva Hirsch.
The Holocaust.
Yeah, and the Birmingham Holocaust Education Center has her oral testimony. You can go find also a lot of other testimonies there at the center.
We also have an exhibit.
Oh,
The exhibit, traveling exhibit all over the United States can travel our exhibit about what from the Holocaust.
So Rita's saying there's also a traveling exhibit that's going around spreading information all over the country, so you can check it out there too. Thank you all again for coming. Thank you to Josephine and to Reva for sharing the story.